right. I want to welcome everybody to yet another episode of These Shadows podcast. I'm your host, Trip Bodenheimer, and I'm excited today to be joined by Kristen Joy. She's an actress. She is currently helping women be full of themselves, creator of, I'm going to struggle with this, Voluptuous Life. Did I say that right?
Perfect.
Perfect. We'll peel back the layer on that one a little bit in just a moment. Dedicated to abundant health and happiness for all throughout conscious living. Ma'am, thank you very much for being a guest here on the Shadows podcast.
Thank you for having me. And I love that you just called me ma'am because I'm in the South right now and I'm getting used to that.
Yeah, and tell our listeners where you're currently at.
I am currently in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
I still have not been there yet.
It's magical. I got to tell you, I love it here.
Last time we were talking, where were you? You had like a really nice setup. You were like outside.
Last time I was in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, I swear there was like palm trees or something. Like it was really, really nice when we were having a conversation last time. So we were working right before we hit record. You were being basically like my speech coach. Voluptuous. Did I say it right the second time?
Wow, you are so good.
I'm on a roll now. Tell our listeners why I've struggled with that word so much.
You know, so I said most people struggle with it, and I'm not exactly sure why, right? Like everyone seems to put like an M in there and say, well, I don't want to say it wrong again because then I'm going to trick your brain into saying it wrong again.
But that's how I was saying it to you earlier.
Right. Cover your ears when I say this, but most people say voluptuous and there's no M in there. So it's just voluptuous. It should just roll off your tongue, feel full in your mouth, and then just leave your mouth without an M.
Yeah, I was overthinking it, I think. All right. So before we start getting into your story, we're going to throw some of the rapid fire questions at you. And I haven't told you any of these. First, what gives your life meaning?
Let me repeat it. What gives my life meaning? I think for me, I have to feel like I am being authentic to who I am as I continue to figure out who I am. And that also needs to look like I am putting some good out into the world. So I need to be serving, but I also want to be enjoying my life at the same time. So for me, those two pieces go hand in hand.
Okay. That's a really good answer. What is an area of your life that you're never satisfied with?
Wait, how long did you say we had for this podcast?
Yeah.
I am a little bit of a perfectionist. So I started to refer to myself as, instead of a type A personality, I started saying I'm type lowercase a minus. So, I'm not as like meticulous, I think, or critical as I used to be about myself, but I definitely always think I could have done a better job. And that pretty much goes with everything that I do. So I still enjoy my life experience, but in the moments after something has happened, I always think like, oh, maybe I could have, X, Y, Z.
Yeah. Okay. So hindsight type thing.
Yeah, I think when I'm in it, it feels good. And then I think maybe that voice, I don't know if you know about that voice that lives in the head sometimes that can be a little negative and critical. Oh, yeah. That voice, and maybe the voice is helpful. Maybe it's like, oh, here's some notes for next time. But sometimes it doesn't feel like that.
Okay. What advice would you have given yourself 10 years ago?
10 years ago. Okay, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I'm going to think back to how old I would have been 10 years ago. I think I would give myself this advice maybe at any age, and it would be have more fun. So, because there's an importance, I think, to how I try to show up in the world. And sometimes I think like, but if I'm just focused on having fun, then the essence and the joy of who I really am comes through and I don't have to worry about all that other stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Final question. You could have dinner with 3 people. Family members are not included.
Oh, thank goodness, because I would have insulted some of my family.
But to add a little twist to it, 3 people who are no longer with us anymore.
Okay.
Who would you pick?
Okay, you said people, right?
Mm-hmm. They could
So
be
they have to
historical
be-
figures.
But they have to be humans.
Yes.
Okay.
Now I'm interested.
We can talk more about that. Okay, so 3 historical people. They're no longer with us. Ooh, this one I'm really going to have to think about. Okay, no, I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to have the first things that come to my mind. So
There you
Abe
go.
Lincoln, Honest Abe popped into my head.
Okay.
I think he was like a huge, like in stature, a very tall man, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that in of itself would be fun to be around somebody, because I'm like so little that I would have been like probably just gaping at him in his, in his stature. But seemingly so groundbreaking and like open-hearted and, on the right side of history.
Right.
So he would be fun to have around. Then who isn't with us that... Okay, so the next person that came to mind is Mother Teresa, because I need to have a woman at the table.
She always gets invited every time I ask this.
Good. So I need to have a woman at the table besides me, clearly. I feel like just to bask in her, even if she didn't say anything, to bask in like her love, and just that like the wisdom that probably just seeps out of her would be life-changing. Okay, and then I need somebody who's going to have some witty banter with me, and I don't know if Mother T and Honest Abe can roll.
He might, though. I've heard he had a good sense of humor.
Did he? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now I like him even more.
Not sure about her, though.
Right. Knowing her, I mean, she probably had a little wit going on. Okay, what's a good third person? Not family. Oh, okay. So let's think about somebody who passed away recently. I'll do, it's not too recent, but let's do Prince, because how crazy of an eclectic bunch is that?
Jeez. What do they have in common?
Right. And he was so, I mean, he could play most instruments, right? Mm-hmm. And like his voice was an amazing instrument. His body was an amazing instrument. I mean, that would be some dinner party.
Yeah. Interesting fact. My wife, she said that she's always told me that her mom used to babysit Prince when he was a baby. Yeah. Pretty
wow.
Cool. I told my daughters that and they're like, oh, that's nice. I was like, you don't understand how cool that is.
That is so cool. And also I feel like she could just get rich and famous off of that fact. Like, do you just want your children to turn out as good as Prince did?
What a good, like, what good marketing for like a babysitting company or something. Yeah.
Right.
So thank you. You survived our rapid fire questions. Now,
that was fun.
Yeah, it was. That was pretty good. That was probably one of the most interesting dinner for threes that I've heard. Just imagine that group together. So now tell us a little bit about your story. Tell us we'll start off with your childhood and upbringing. It was in New Jersey, correct?
It was in Bruce Springsteen's hometown of, and I always leave a dramatic pause because people then always like to jump in and look at me like, I don't know who the heck Bruce Springsteen is, for the young people.
The boss.
The boss.
Yeah.
Or they like to jump in and say Asbury Park, which is incorrect.
I was actually going to say Asbury Park.
Yes. So it's Freehold, New Jersey.
Okay.
Only also famous for, I think, the mall, which is where I had my first job as a cinnamon roll baker.
Really? Cinnabon?
No, it was called Cindy's Cinnamon Rolls. And I don't know if they're still around. I know they're not at the mall anymore, but they were like a Syracuse company. Yeah.
Okay. So you grew up, you were making cinnamon rolls there. And then you went to college in California, correct?
I did.
So how in the world did you end up from Jersey to California?
Yeah, great question. So I had spent a lot of family vacations in California. So I am one of 3 kids and then my 2 parents. So we would take trips to probably all over California. The areas I remember most would be like the LA area, I guess,
Yeah.
but we definitely went all over. And I think number one, fell in love with California because it's just gorgeous. It's the best, I think, the best of everything that like nature and the weather has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as an adult, I also love just how like healthy and open-minded, certain parts of California are.
Mm-hmm.
But as I looked back on some of the decisions I'd made in my life, I realized that a big part of why I decided to go to California was because it was far away. So it's not to say that there was anything like traumatic or troublesome in my childhood. It was very like beautiful and safe. But I did feel like my spirit and my personality wanted to be freer than the spirit and personality, maybe personalities of my parents.
Mm-hmm.
They were a little more, I think they have more fear and they want more structure. And I wanted to just be free and go and do and have my own opinions and make my own choices. So I think, yeah, behind the scenes, it was like, oh, California is really far away and I'm going to be free.
And you were what, 18 when you decided to make that move?
Yes. Yeah, I
How'd
think
that
17.
feel?
Yeah.
How'd that feel, 17, 18?
It felt great. Like, I think at that point in my life, although I imagine in high school, I was probably like, a typical, I don't know if it's typical, but like one of those high schoolers that like has a lot of self-doubt and, uncertainty. But I think that at that point when I was making that decision, I didn't realize like when I went to California that it would really split my life in half, that I would have like, not see my family and friends for a long time. I was actually even dating someone that I was leaving behind. So I didn't realize how it would be difficult because I would have two sort of separate lives. But I think I was just excited because nobody else was doing it. I tend to be the kind of person who likes to be different. So, people chose the same-ish similar schools. And I was like, I'm going to California.
Did you go to Berkeley or where did you go to school there?
I went to UC Santa Barbara.
UC Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Gauchos.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
UC Santa Barbara Gauchos. Okay. What was the biggest thing you learned about yourself when you were in college?
I'd say, I don't know if this is the biggest thing, but it's one thing that just came to me right now. So when I was in high school, I did really well in high school. So straight A's, I was in the AP classes, like things came pretty easily to me. So I think that I thought I was like really smart. Not that I like spent time thinking about it, but I just think that it was like, oh, I'm smart, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I went to a pre-med program at UCSB and I was like, oh, I'm not really that smart. It was really challenging. So I, at that point, was like, okay, so this isn't fun anymore. And it's time for me to make some decisions that, continue to feel in alignment with what feels good and right for my current path.
So you mentioned you were starting off pre-med. When you decided to make that change, because that's hard for a lot of people. I had to do the same thing. I was in college and I decided to go from one career to the other. What was that next option for you?
Meaning if I wasn't going to be a doctor, what would I do?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really think it through. It's interesting, like when I think about the process of being in college and sort of getting out of college, a little backstory. My dad thought we were going to be paying the in-state tuition fees for college. So when I went to look at it, and I had been offered like some scholarships to some schools. So I think my dad had been hoping, she's going to go to a school with a scholarship,
Yeah.
So when I went to look at Santa Barbara, I fell in love with it. And it wasn't on my radar. A friend had said, I thought I would go to UCLA just because of the reputation.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine had said, you have to see Santa Barbara. It's like right on the beach. It's beautiful, So I went and I saw it. And I think like my eyes lit up in a way that my dad was like, oh,
Gotta do it.
So, yes. But
there goes
so
Rutgers.
he was right. Exactly. He was thinking, well, at least we're paying in-state tuition fees. And then come to find out like, oh no, we were looking at the wrong numbers, So I think in the back of my mind, I always had this like, I don't know if it was guilt. It was more of like respect for the money that my dad was spending. So
Hmm.
when I decided that I was going to change my major, I was like, what can I do that will get me out on time? So I'm not going to continue to spend more of his money. And also that I enjoy and I will, hopefully pass the classes, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really what happened is I ended up getting my degree in biopsychology, not really knowing what I was going to do with it.
And then how did acting become a thing for you?
Yeah. So it's right at this time. So I think maybe I was a senior. A girlfriend of mine was a talented actress. She was, I believe, more of a stage actress, but
Hmm.
she had heard on the radio that there was like this like top LA manager coming to town, and she wanted to go and like audition for him. So she said, "Do you want to come with me?" And I think I had fun like doing some acting like growing up, and I used to like read books and like do different voices for all the books, like that was
Hmm.
always fun to me, but I don't think I ever thought I would actually be an actress. But when she said that, I'm not sure if I was like, ooh, cool, maybe I'll be an actress, or if it was just like, all right, I'll come along. I honestly don't remember. And I auditioned for him, and I was wearing like the tightest, tiniest, like skimpiest outfit, which, like, being the feminist that I am today, I would probably look back on that girl and be like, honey, you don't have to show it all. But the reason why I bring that up is because I was so nervous. Like, and when I get nervous, there's like no hiding it physically. Like, I can hide it like with my personality, like that's all good. But like, I get the worst hives on my chest. If you could see my chest now, I probably would have them. That's just like how I am.
On the Shadows podcast? Are you serious?
Yeah. Um, so without me knowing, I think this is when I first realized that I had hives when I got nervous. Without me realizing it, I finished my audition and he was like, "Are you nervous?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Really?" Because you should see your chest. And I looked down and I was like so red and blotchy.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, so to make a long story short, I don't think I had a lot of talent. Maybe it was like innate talent, and just that I was having fun and I didn't know any better, but I certainly wasn't studied as an actor. And my friend was studied as an actress. And he ended up not wanting to represent her and wanting to represent me. And it was a little bittersweet, obviously, because she really cared, but it was really because he picked me because of my look
Yeah.
and didn't pick her because of her look, which is just kind of BS. But it's also like the way the industry works or worked, especially at that time, or for what he was looking for specifically.
Yeah.
So he basically was like, "I'll take you on. Do you want to try it?" And I was like, "Well, this is kind of perfect timing." My boyfriend at the time lived in LA and I didn't know what I was going to do for a living. So I was like, "I'll move to LA. I'll try my hand at it. We'll see what happens."
What's the worst audition experience you've ever had?
So I am blessed with a memory that doesn't necessarily work so well, especially for the negative things.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I have a hard time remembering. But let me think. I do remember. So I consider myself like that I have a good sense of humor, right?
Hmm.
But I didn't at the time, and maybe I'm not even still good at it, who even knows, don't necessarily know how to like, or didn't at the time know how to deliver the script as it was written with the kind of humor that it had written into it. I think I didn't understand it. So I remember, again, I talked about how nervous I was, and my manager had said to me, "Here's a trick, like just have a glass of wine before you audition, like it'll just calm your nerves." And I was like, all right, great, I'll try it. That doesn't help me to like feel more comfortable. Like, but anyway, I tried it and went into the audition and delivered it as I thought it should have been delivered. And I don't remember exactly what the casting director or the director or producer, whoever he was, whatever he said, but he was like, "You do realize that there's humor in this piece, right?" And I was like, "Oh." wow. And it's like, when you get a comment like that, it's like,
Yeah.
that's not going to inspire me to all of a sudden, like, be good and like
Yeah.
be funny.
Start giggling. Yeah.
But it was one of my first auditions. And I feel like it was one of those moments where I was like, oh man, this isn't necessarily going to be fun the whole time or easy the whole time.
Yeah. And a lot of people, you know, especially on the outside looking in, probably imagine being an actress or an actor and like, oh, it's glamorous. It's probably this amazing life. Before we get into your actual acting career, what were some of the highs and lows that you've experienced throughout your journey?
As an actor?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I guess the highs and lows are probably tied together, but we'll see as I talk about it how it unfolds. I was up for a lot of things that wouldn't necessarily have like made me a big star, although you never know what the trajectory would have been, but things that would have changed the course of, you know. So every time I would be up for something, I would again be very, very nervous, you know, be like my own worst enemy in terms of like being able to calm my nerves around things. Get a call back or not, you know, in the time after leaving an audition. They always say for many actors, it's like the rear view mirror. When you're looking at yourself in the rear view mirror as you're leaving the casting office, that you like give your best read, you know? So for me, it would be like, that would be the time where I would start to second guess, like, how was it? How did I do? Oh, I should have done this, whatever. So you would never necessarily know if you did a good job. Casting directors sometimes would say, great job, whether they meant it or not, or they wouldn't say anything at all. So I would leave just sort of never knowing. So it would be like the high of getting the audition, the nervousness around the audition, the performance, leaving the room, not knowing how they felt about it, you know, the beating myself up around it, you know, the waiting, you know, you never know when you're going to hear, you know, and then finding out either you never hear, which is just like, okay, at some point, I guess I give up. Right. Or then you hear. So then you hear, you get a call back and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, great. They did like me, you know? For me, that would also be like, oh, maybe I fooled them enough into thinking that I was good enough. And now I'm in trouble, because usually for callbacks, you have to there's more people in the room. So it's usually instead of just the casting director, it's now like the writers, the producer, depending on how big the project is. So there's a lot more. I mean, it's just, for me, it was a lot more nerves, you know? So going back into the room and again, not knowing who's going to be there. So you walk into a room and now there's 15 people just sitting there, like probably in judgment. 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, so then that, and then there had been roles like I was up for a part on a soap. And when you are up for a part, they have you sign the actual contract. So when you sign the contract, you have to agree, here's the amount of money I'm going to be making, here's the amount of time I'm locked in for. This particular one was shooting in New York City and I was living in LA at the time. So I had to like mentally prepare to move to New York City. So do I want to, you know, I'm from the East Coast. It'll be nice to be with my family, but I love my life here. You go through this whole thing, you know, audition, you're on set for the screen test, you're working with the real actor, you know, you're going through all the motions. And again, like afterwards, it's a whirlwind. I don't remember what I've said, how I did, how it went, you know, and then the waiting again, and then come to find out, like, I don't get it. And now I'm like excited about living in New York. And I'm like, man, you know, and it's like that. I feel for me, it was like for every role, that was the journey, you know?
I can imagine. Yeah. Talk to us about your experience with Buffy.
Buffy was fun. Buffy was, and it's interesting because, and I don't know if this makes its way into a conversation, but that there has been some controversy around Buffy these days because of some of the behavior of Joss. But so putting that aside, this is before knowing any of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was one of my biggest, earliest auditions. And when I went in to read, I actually read with him for him and the casting director, not really knowing who he was at the time. So there was just the regular nerves. There wasn't like extra nerves around it. But so I read for him, and actually, I think I remember leaving there feeling really good about the audition, and then finding out that I had booked it. And then my manager had said to me, but there's a problem. The problem is that they thought you were in the union already, and you're not. So they can only hire union actors for the job. So they said what they're gonna try to do is Taft-Hartley you, which is a way of like getting me into the union so that I can work this job. So my experience, I think, was so much easier than most people's. It was like I auditioned for something that was probably too big for me because it was a union job, and then ended up just getting invited into the union right because of that job, which was really cool. So I was like, oh, this industry's easy. I don't know what everybody's talking about.
That's like the athlete that wins like the Super Bowl their first year, and they're like, this is easy. It's going to be like this every year.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, talk to us about your latest job, Wives with Knives.
Yes.
You said it was a week of very intense filming.
It sure was. And it's interesting because so I had left LA thinking that like acting is sort of something I'm just kind of doing on the side, because I wasn't so committed to like my whole life being around it, because it was so many ups and downs and so many things were not in my control. So when I ended up moving back to the West Coast, I think I went LA, East Coast, and then East Coast to Northern California. I thought, oh, there's actually a small acting market there. So maybe I'll get back into the industry. So because of the agent that I got there, I was able to audition for this role. And I auditioned for this particular show so many times, like not this particular episode, but the show. I probably went into the casting director like 5 times. And I don't think I was even getting callbacks. I think I would have a first call and then hear nothing, and then another first call. And I kept thinking like, do they like me or do they not like me? Because like I'm not getting further, but yet they keep calling me back, right? So finally, the last time I went in to read with her, she was like, just so you know, they really like you. So they're trying to find a role that works for you. And I was like, that's so good to know, because it helps to quiet some of the like negative voices in my head, right?
Yeah.
Although, can I do a quick side note around this?
Absolutely.
Remind me to come back to where we're going.
Yep, absolutely.
But do you remember the Power Rangers?
I do.
Okay. So I was up for the role of the Pink Power Ranger. This is so long ago.
Yeah.
So when I auditioned for that role, I was just terrible. I was a terrible actor. Like I didn't even know how to engage with the other person in the room in like a way that seemed like we were human beings having a conversation. Right? Like this is, I mean, of course, this is my take on it, whatever. But so, but I was auditioning for Saban himself, who was like, you know, the guy. Yeah. So the casting director pulled me aside after I had done that read, and it was me and the other actor who was being was up for the role of one of the other, you know, color rangers. So she said to me, Kristen, he really likes you. They really like you. And she was telling me this in a way to like help me to calm down. And all that did for me was like make me way more nervous. So like I'm sure I gave an even worse read the second time. Anyway, so coming back to Wives with Knives, when this casting director, because now I'm older and wiser and I have more experience and I have more confidence, when she said this to me, it helped, because I was like, oh, okay, it makes sense why I haven't booked, but why they keep calling me back. So I think I did feel a lot more comfortable. But it's really challenging material because they're real life stories of, well, this one was a real life story of a woman who had been in an abusive relationship for a really long time. So it was a lot of physical abuse, verbal abuse. She is also turns to drugs and alcohol. So it's a lot of me bringing up stuff that isn't necessarily at the forefront of my personality or my experience. So it was a lot of like having to like summon that and kind of live in that world for an entire week.
How tough is that on your body, like mentally, physically?
I think so. Physically, I I said to the actor who was playing my husband, I was like, I actually need you to like toss me around a little bit because I need to feel, I guess it's more of like method acting. I need to
Mm-hmm.
like be engaged at a deeper level. So he would, sort of reluctantly and probably like a little bit fearfully, like kind of try to like toss me around a little bit so that I could
Sign
really.
this, please.
Right, exactly. But it's funny because I had to. I'm not giving anything away because I don't know how many people are actually going to go watch the episode. Maybe they will. It was called
Yeah.
the 26-year war. You can Google it.
Okay.
But so she ends up stabbing him. And maybe that's all I'll say about it. But we had to do multiple takes with me stabbing him,
Mm.
and you use props. Sometimes you use a real knife, and sometimes you use a prop. And so, because I think I'm more method, I really needed to like throw my like effort into like stabbing him. So the first couple of times, it was like, okay, and then the actor was like, I think I'm actually starting to get like bruises, and it hurts, and like I can't keep doing multiple takes like this, so that we ended up having to like tape cardboard to his chest and like try to pad him up as much as possible so that I could keep giving my full performance without like really hurting him.
Wow.
So it was tougher on his body than mine for sure, because I saw his bruises and they were real.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll get a link for that and definitely have that on here. And so after, well, I'm assuming it was, it's definitely been in between your journey of acting. But talk to us about your experience you had in India.
Yes. I was wondering if you were going to bring that up, and I was like, "Ooh, maybe I should have reminded him about India because it was
So,
such a special time
do
in
my
my life."
research here. I do my research.
Yes, you do. Good job. So, India, some people say that if you go to India, it's not necessarily for the reason you think, which I love, because I do think that there is a soul pull that takes people there, whether they realize it or not. And I think the beauty of going to India is giving yourself a moment to be like, is there a bigger reason for why I'm here? For me, it was a spiritual journey, but I'm speaking to people who like think they're going there on a business trip. I encourage you to think, maybe not think, sink into the heart and to the soul, and wonder, be curious if maybe there's another reason you're going there,
Mm.
because it really is like the birthplace of spirituality.
Yeah.
So I went there because, to make a long story short, I was in a period of like intense heartbreak, which is often what cracks people open to spirituality and personal growth, right? And I had met a woman who had studied with this guru in India, and she had heard about, because we worked together. She was hired to be my assistant at a really negative job. Another story for another time. So it was like a magical meeting, though. Like if I wasn't in this job, I wouldn't have met her. So she heard about my story. She said, for a real deep healing, there's a meditation practice that you could do. And I had never meditated before. But I always knew growing up that there was more depth to my relationship with God or spirituality, or whatever you want to call like the magical powers that be.
Mm-hmm.
I always knew there was something more than what I learned in like CCD, or like I went to Catholic high school. So I was curious to try these ancient practices. And I went from never having meditated ever to meditating an hour a day for 101 days in a row.
Wow.
And things shifted.
Yeah.
So next thing I knew, she was like, well, next step is, you go to India and you go to the ashram and you like, work with the guru and all that. And so I was like, and off we go.
So another lifestyle change that you have that I really respect, and it's something that I am currently trying to work on as well, along with the meditation piece, is I just watched a documentary not too long ago called Game Changers. I'm not sure if you've seen it on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's really good. And I think you know where this question's going. So talk to us about a vegan lifestyle, like living that vegan lifestyle and what it's done for you and your body.
Yeah. So to be clear, I'm not vegan. I just make lots of vegan choices, but I
Mm-hmm.
have been vegetarian for going on 13 years now.
Okay.
So that's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the becoming vegetarian at the moment that I became vegetarian was sort of forced upon me. And it's it's the best decision, one of the best decisions I've ever made to be healthy, to live in alignment with my morals and values, to have such beautiful relationships with animals. Like all the magic happens, I think, when you live in alignment with, what you think is right.
Mm-hmm.
But so what happened was I was with my guru during a program, or actually I was traveling to meet my guru and all of the students. And I was flat out an animal eater, a meat eater at that time. I'd actually been working with a nutritionist who was helping me get over some allergies, and he had me having lots of protein, but clean protein, like all organic. I was already eating organic
Plant-based.
at this point.
Yeah.
Um, but still eating, animals at the time. And I went to California to go to this program, and I knew that there was an In-N-Out burger. Do you know In-N-Out burger?
Yeah, I know. Very. You've been in California. I know all about In-N-Out.
Yes. So I knew of In-N-Out burger, and I think I'd had it once or twice, but because it was so rare back then, I was like, ooh, when I go to California and I drive to this ashram, I'm going to go to In-N-Out burger. So I end
Typical
up
tourist.
yes, as luck would have it, I get paired up with a woman to drive up to the ashram together. I think it was like a 2 or 3 hour drive, who's vegetarian. And out of respect for her,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'm not going to go to In-N-Out. I'm going to go somewhere where there's vegetarian food. And on the way back from the ashram, I'm not going to be driving her. I'm going to In-N-Out. So we go to the ashram and we have a beautiful program, and my guru teaches us this ancient Vedic process, super powerful process. And part of the diksha, which is like the rules around like getting the energy of the process to where it needs to be, is that I had to be what's called sattvic, which is basically vegetarian, but it's a pure way of eating, for I think it was 3 months. So as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh no, what about In-N-Out?
Did you a
And then,
favor, trust me.
yes, no, I know that. But I did think like, well, what am I going to eat? Because the nutritionist had me eating a certain way. So I started to think like, well, what am I going to be able to eat that's still in alignment with what he thinks I need to heal my body, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I, for 3 months, didn't necessarily feel great for the first probably month and a half. And in my mind, I was like, see, I'm one of those people that has to eat meat, what it probably turned out to be was I was detoxing, right, from like eating all the garbage that I had been
Yeah.
eating for a whole lifetime. Not to say that I grew up on garbage. My mom made beautiful home cooked meals, but we just don't, we're not aware of all the toxins and the chemicals and the pharmaceuticals and all
Yeah.
of the things that are in our food, right? So I think I was detoxing and also not knowing how to get what I needed nutritionally in a diet that I was not sure how to make it work,
Yeah.
So yeah, 3 months of, I don't know if this is going to work, to all of a sudden, like, I feel great. I never get sick. This is like probably the best I felt in my entire life. And then I watched some of those kinds of documentaries. And at that point, I think my relationship to animals changed. I always thought I was an animal lover. And I realized, like, there's no way I could say I love animals and eat them, right? And
Yeah.
like, why do I love one kind of animal but eat another? I started to just see meat as what it is, which is like literally the body parts of animals. And I have not gone back. So I never got that closer burger. I never got that closer steak. I just never looked back.
I'm not an In-N-Out. I'm a Whataburger guy. So I can, you are fine with that. But no, it's interesting because that documentary was talking about how, even doing research on the skeletal remains of cavemen, they ate plant-based diets they weren't eating animals like it's just, I think it was like in the, you know, early 1900s is when that really became like a big thing. But speaking
Well, it
of
was the
animals,
sign of the wealthy, right? If you could afford to eat
mm-hmm,
animals, it was
it's
a
a
sign
sign
of,
of the wealthy.
yeah.
Yep. And then it became like a machismo thing. It became, you know, like marketing, like cigarettes was, you know, Babe Ruth smokes, but he died of cancer, throat cancer, I believe it was. But then they started replacing cigarettes with marketing with burgers, to where like the dripping burger from Hardee's on the commercial, and it just became like a sign of you're a man if you do this, and if you're a vegan or you know, live a vegetarian lifestyle or anything, you're viewed more of a wimp. So
Yeah.
it's been more of a marketing thing. But uh, perfect transition here, because you were just talking about animals. So you volunteer at a rescue, rehab, and release facility for wildlife. I thought this was pretty interesting. Raccoon foster care team. So tell us about your work with wildlife and specifically the raccoons.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I am madly in love with raccoons. And I didn't know until I started working with them how magical they were. But I had a cat for 21 years, and my cat was a Himalayan. I don't know if at this point, if I probably would adopt, not shop, but I was obsessed with the way this cat looked,
Yeah.
because I don't know if you know what they look like, big round blue eyes
Mm-hmm.
and just fluffy and just, oh, they're like a pile of loving mush. So so there's something about that look that I like. And so I think that Gizmo, my cat, looked similar to like raccoons, right? So I think that like raccoons have always been so cute to me. Um, I always want to do some sort of volunteering and giving back. My dad had been in hospice at some point, so I had, after he passed, become a hospice volunteer. After that, I wanted something that I think felt lighter, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I was like, you know, what can I do? And then I think I saw at the back of a magazine that you could volunteer for a local, this local facility in the town that I was in. So I went to the training and I started just volunteering in the clinic. And the clinic is basically, they rescue, rehab, and release any animals that are smaller than deer, I think is too big for them, but that have been negatively affected by humans. So hit by
Mm.
cars, poisoned, trapped, all of those kinds of things. So I would be in the hospital working with all of these different animals. And then I was introduced to the idea that I could be on the foster care team for raccoons, or there's a bunch of animals you could do it for, but they specifically said raccoons. And basically, what that entails is a lot of times humans either knowingly or unknowingly relocate a raccoon that they find in the house, or maybe another wild animal that they find in the house. And so they move it to a different location, which is illegal, but it's also terrible, because what ends up happening is if you move a mom, you don't know that she's got babies, and now you're leaving all of these babies behind. So not only is the animal mom like heartbroken, the
Mm-hmm.
babies are now scared, starving to death, you know. So what wild care does is they take in the orphans. And so if you're on the team, you then are trained to be able to like bottle feed them, you know, do all the things that their mom would do without being equipped with raccoon nipples,
Yeah.
to try to get them to a place where they're stable, and then retrain them into understanding they're a wild animal and they should not be friends with humans. And then we end up releasing them back into the area where they came from.
That's pretty cool. I know my mom, her neighbors, she lives in Sumter, South Carolina, but her neighbors, um, she works with raccoons. So I saw that and I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting, because I always hear, you know, my mom talking about her neighbor and her dealings with the raccoons and stuff.
They are
And
so sweet. Can I just do a little raccoon plug?
absolutely,
Because
absolutely,
people think they're just trash pandas, and that like they get
great
annoyed when they're,
outdoors.
yeah, they get annoyed when their garbage is like torn up by these guys, whatever. But they are, I think they're like a cross between a wild animal, which obviously they are, like, and a puppy,
Mm.
because they are so sweet and so smart. So when I'm raising them, they basically think that I'm their mom, you know, until the
Yeah.
point where we have to tell them humans are not your friend, your family. But like, oh my goodness, like my heart just swells with how adorable and sweet and smart and playful and just like, they're just amazing animals.
That is awesome though. That's pretty cool. I would like to interact with a raccoon. I think that would be pretty cool. Like you said, they get the bad rap because I think it was Great Outdoors with Dan Aykroyd and John Candy where they were going through the trash.
Yep. And adults are, they're well equipped to do some harm. They've got teeth and nails. So it's like, you don't really want to be hanging out with an adult raccoon, like high-fiving.
So is that kind of how it is? Like the infant stage is probably the best time to interact with them, and they get to a certain age and it's like, okay, you're off.
Yeah, well, I should say that people shouldn't, the average person should not interact with wildlife. I have to say that as a responsible, volunteer. But I think just when animals are babies, that's when they are, they're not going to tear you apart the way like an adult wild animal will.
So note to our listeners, don't just go out in the woods looking for raccoons and try to go like, come here. Like, what was it? Elf. He did that in Elf. So last thing to talk about here, voluptuous.
Nope.
I messed it up that time. So yeah, go ahead and tell our listeners about the work you're doing there.
With Voluptuous Life.
There you go.
Yes. So I have this fire in my heart and in my spirit about, I think, giving voice to those who are worthy of it but don't have it, as they should, right? So there's a lot of people in our society, there's a lot of beings in our society that don't have the respect and their rightful place, I think. So I have always had this thing about not understanding why women are not equal, right? And of course, now not understanding how animals could be treated so cruelly. But with Voluptuous Life, it was really about like lifting women, helping women to get quiet and clear and centered, giving themselves priority because so often they don't, to listen to what it is they really want, who they really are, and just basically giving them the tools, helping them to create rituals for a healthier body, heart, mind, and spirit. So it's about living in alignment with your morals and values, finding joy, stepping into your power, and just supporting other women.
And if our listeners want to find out more about that, where can you point them to?
Well, they're going to have to learn how to spell voluptuous, but then they could go to Voluptuous Life. So voluptuouslife.com is the website. Okay. I am on Instagram, Voluptuous Life as well, Facebook, A Voluptuous Life. So I think most of those are my three ways of finding me.
Okay. And we were talking about a little Kickstarter. There's a Kickstarter going on with you right now, right?
Well, there's a Kickstarter going on with me by way of my boyfriend, my partner, correct, who is the inventor. Yes.
Which has gotten y'all to Chattanooga, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So he, so COVID hit and sort of life changed for people, for better or for worse. And I like to think a combination for everyone, right? So he started, like a lot of people, working from home, and home used to be my space. So, and as a meditation coach and a women's coach, I like quiet and I like my own space and I like to do things on my own time. So we started working together. So it's now having two people, in the same office. He was on a lot of Zoom calls. He was noticing people forgetting to mute, forgetting to unmute. He was having anxiety, right? He was having anxiety around it himself. He would have multiple windows open on his computer. He wouldn't be able to like unmute fast enough if he was called, to answer. So it was creating like a lot of anxiety. And then also I wouldn't know if he was on an important call, and I would come in like, hey, what do you want to have for dinner?
Found a raccoon.
Yeah, exactly. That's better. So he came up with the idea of a physical mute button that lights up so that people around you know whether you're on a call or not, whether your mic is live or not. It also stays in sync with the app you're using, so that if you press the button, you're automatically muted on Zoom, or you're muted on all the other apps that it supports, so that everyone on the meeting also knows that you're muted. So no one's wondering, like, was it you that made that noise? Is it your family? Is it your,
Other than the little mic, just the little mic coming undone.
Yes. So this is like a more noticeable and easy to just touch, untouch. And I'm probably not even doing it complete justice, but it's called Mute Sync, MUTESYNC. And they've got some really helpful videos. The Kickstarter is still live. They went way past their initial goal, and it's still selling. So people can still support the Kickstarter if they want to get a mute button, support a good cause.
Yeah, and I can tell you from teaching, oh my gosh, that thing would have been a lifesaver for my last year and a half of going through teaching virtual.
Yeah, exactly. It is super easy for kids to use. It's really easy for everybody, and it looks cool too. So.
And is it compatible with like Teams, Zoom, all those different platforms?
Yes. So I don't know specifically which ones, but a lot of them. And again, the website and the Kickstarter will be clear about that. And they're also, the money that they're raising is going into products in the pipeline. So they're going to be able to expand into all the other platforms.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely have links for that as well on our description. Final comments for our listeners.
Dun, dun, dun. Final comments.
Oh, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
I'll change that question up. What do you want your legacy to be? When people mention Kristen Joy 50 years from now, what do you want them to say about you?
I would like people to, I don't care if they say it, what I would like people to feel in their hearts is that I was kind, that I was dedicated, that when I believe in something, I go for it, and that maybe I told a good joke or two.
Kind minus the, I need you to stab me with a propped knife in the chest where I have to put cardboard on.
Exactly.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you taking time to do this. Final, plug for where people can find out more about you or any of the amazing things you're doing, or plugs, excuse me.
Yeah, voluptuouslife.com. I actually just started, well, I haven't launched it yet, but if anybody hears this ahead of time, they are welcome to go check it out. I'm doing a product to support women on their meditation journey. A lot of times women don't know, or people in general don't know how to start, right? And it's a little overwhelming. And if it doesn't work the way they think it should work, they think they can't meditate. So I put together these little travel altars, which I think are so fun and so beautiful because I'm going to different vintage stores and thrift stores. So I'm picking up mindful, gently used containers.
Well, that's in your shop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that people can see a container that they love. A lot of them, like I said, they're vintage. Some of them are just gently used. And then I fill it after having a call with the women. I fill it with items that are really good for where they're at on their wellness journey, their spiritual journey. I give them a meditation practice and I sort of take them by the hand very gently to help them ease into a practice with this really beautiful altar that they can get.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen those on there. I think last time I checked, you had like 8 of them or something like that. But yeah,
it's a work in progress. But they're
nice. They're really nice.
Thank you.
So yeah, well, once again, thank you so much for taking time to do this. I know the Shadows is following you on Instagram as well. So anything that you're knocking out, you're doing, we'll be more than welcome to share that on our page as well. But thank you so much for taking time for being here today.
Thank you so much. And I will support you as well. We should support each other.
Absolutely.
And anyone listening. I mean, I love to support, I'm all about supporting women. It's not like I'm going to turn down supporting a man, but like if there's any women out there that need some support for what you're doing, let's support each other. This was super fun. Thank you so much.
I enjoyed it. Well, folks, thank you for listening to another episode of the Shadows Podcast.